Thank you for tuning into Ray-ality TV. I'm Ray Bakari. Joining me today is the Rhode Island Young Republicans leadership team, Ken Naylor Jr., who is the chairman, and Daniel Perry Jr., who is the executive director. Guys, it's good to have you on.
Thank you for having us, Ray.
Thank you.
So, for those who don't know both what your roles entail and what the organization's goal is, can you just explain it?
Yeah, so our goal right now, the mission statement is to recruit, train, and elect the future generation of Republican leaders in Rhode Island. As the chair, I oversee a lot of the day-to-day operations, fundraising, candidate recruitment. The big thing is what Dan does as the executive director. We rely a lot on him, and he really handles pretty much everything. Without him, I don't know where we'd be. So, Dan, if you want to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, so as the executive director, I run our day-to-day operations, including our social media, event planning, recruiting and training candidates, like Chairman just mentioned, and also, coming up with plans and getting our organization to continuously grow from the good job he's been doing since he's been chairman and just getting more members and really trying to get young Republicans elected at the town council level, school committee level, state rep, state senate, and everywhere else.
How'd you guys both get involved with Republican politics in the state?
Back in, I believe it was 2020 or right before 2020, I walked into a state central committee meeting. I forgot how I met Madam Susianki, who was the chair at the time, at which point I walked in and she was eager to have me. Having young, fresh blood at the time wasn't really a thing. The Young Republicans wasn't really active whatsoever. So at that point in time, I walked up to Sue and I said, "There's nobody else my age around here. I'd like to help." At that point, I started looking more into the Young Republicans. Sue thought it was a great idea. When she was chairwoman at the time, made sure we had every resource to grow.
Yeah, and I've known Kenny for a few years now, and as I got more involved in politics and really started to pay attention to local and federal politics, he was someone I talked to with a lot about those issues and those things. And then in March of 2024, he brought me on as ED, and that's kind of my journey with him and this organization.
As you mentioned, Kenny, the organization wasn't as active a couple of years ago. It was almost a little bit dormant. Now, as folks who are probably paying attention to the Rhode Island political scene know, your name ends up in local articles when we get your guys' statements on issues from a range of topics. They're doing more events, fundraisers. You guys get your social media active, as Dan had mentioned. So, what led to this resurgence and rebound for the organization?
I think it's people looking around the state and seeing that we need more Republicans. I mean, let's face it, we are the minority party here in Rhode Island. Also, kudos to you, to everybody at WPRI, even I'm going to say Ian Don as Kathy Gregg, everybody, because they do cover us very fairly, which I do want to give a shout out because they value or they look and respect the opinion of us as young Republicans. So that goes to every reporter. I want to thank everybody for that. And again, I think it's just being consistent over the years. It's always tough getting going when you're building up from nothing, but consistency is the key. Finding a good team is important. For example, anybody that's elected, for example, if they don't have a good administration, they're ineffective. I think we can name somebody in Rhode Island now that doesn't have a strong administration, and I think some people are weak up on the state level of up on Smith Hill. So it takes a strong team, takes consistency. And that's really what it is. And that's why Dan, he's been so important to this organization as far as all the things that he's doing with the social media, event planning, outreach. So kudos to Dan. And again, I thank him for everything he does.
Yeah, and like I said, we've really tried to hit the phones lately, calling and texting our members and people that have attended events prior and trying to get them involved. And there's the YRs have a really good opportunity to drive this party forward and get the young voices involved. So it's our job as the leadership to make sure we're driving people to our events, driving people to our social media pages. And the more active we are and the more people we can get to come to these things, I think will help us start to grow our party even more.
Even aside from the efforts you guys are doing to grow the organization, I noticed that the Rhode Island Young Republicans are very vocal when it comes to any latest development happening in the local political scene, whether it's a bill that you guys agree with or disagree with, or a statement that a politician made, whether it be national or local. Just if you can give me three, what would be the top three issues this organization is passionate about to address in our state?
Yeah, excuse me. There's a few, I think, and the top three, I would, say education is a big one, the economy is a big one, and housing is a big one. As we talk to, young Republicans at our events, one big thing we hear is the concern of starting a family here in Rhode Island because it is expensive to buy a house here. It is expensive to start a family. And, you look at our education system, we have 17% proficient in reading, which isn't really good. We're ranked 34th in the country. So I think that's something that young conservatives are extremely concerned about is this the right place to start a family because of the finances and because of our education policies? So again, education, economy, and housing are the three major policy problems we hear from the people we are talking to.
I want to reflect on 2024 for a moment. That was the most recent election cycle we had, and you guys had an active role in it. There were some mixed results here for Republicans. You had President Trump crack 42%, the highest a Republican presidential candidate has done since the late 80s. There were some GA wins, but also some stinging GA losses from the Republican side. Just looking at it holistically, how would you guys say the Republicans did?
I think it's tough to break it down as a whole, to kind of group it all together. We saw what Trump did, and we saw what Trump made gains in Rhode Island, Central Falls, Providence, a lot of areas that he had also won. So reflecting on it, if you're looking at some of these General Assembly races, we had a lot of candidates that ran not only just from YR perspective, but from a Republican perspective as a whole. I think the big thing is people are looking at things that are going on in the state. There's a number of things that you can allude to where they're displeased. Now, as far as how that trickles down on the ballot, it doesn't always trickle down. And I am vocal on this matter, and I am a little ruthless, I guess. It comes down to the work ethic on a candidate. You can run for General Assembly, but time and time again, if you're not putting in the work, that doesn't always mean the top of the ticket is going to carry you, whether that's president or governor. You got to be able to raise the money. You got to be able to put the effort in. You got to be able to hit doors and have a good message that fits your district. Again, every district is different. If we look up north, you're going to see it's a little bit more red than if you go down south. So the message has to be tailored to the district, and you have to be able to put the work in. And I think there's always a misconception to that and why there's a drop off.
Were there any specific races that you look back on and think, what you just said is going to be important for 26?
Yeah, all of them. Again, looking back on the races, we got to capitalize on these gains. And over the course of the next 2 years, we're going to see what Democrats in Rhode Island do. And we got to capitalize on that. If you're considering on running for office, you need to take note of who your representative are, how they're voting. Are they accessible? Are they always in attendance for their votes and big votes for that matter too? So, it's starting now and building on that. Again, there are a lot of areas, me, myself, I think Woonsocket's a big pickup right now for Republicans. We see Johnston, West Warwick, where both of us are from, is a lot more purple than people realize, Warwick. So there are places that we can make inroads. And again, every year where we close the margins, we have to capitalize on them and continue to build.
Kenny, you ran for office in 2024. You want to look back and tell me what that experience was like?
It was a great experience. I'll be honest with you. Angela Coburn, I did run against her. We
For
came
just to clarify, for West Warwick School Committee.
West Warwick School Committee, Ward 5.
Yep.
Angela Coburn is very much involved in the community. Um, I did call her that night and concede. It was a great, great eye-opening experience because in past years, I've always been the one back in the office, whether it was field, election integrity, where being out there and being the candidate, if you will, is definitely an interesting experience because you hear directly from the voters, what is on their mind, especially something like education. But it was a lot to juggle between doing election integrity, the YRs, running for office. If there's one thing I wish I could do, it's applied myself a lot more, knock those extra doors. And that's the thing, when you're running for office, you got to make sure that your family allows it, your work allows it, your personal life, because it is a major, major commitment that you're making. And trust me, you don't want to feel like I did that night when I lost. So I encourage everybody to work extremely hard, but I'm happy for Angela.
Dan, I want to tie you into some of this conversation about 2024 because speaking of young Republicans, young people had a bit of a swing to the right, particularly younger men. And everybody has their own theory right now as the soul searching happens and further analyzing of the results, where some people say, oh, it's because you had podcasters like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn having Trump on and promoting more conservative messaging. Then maybe there's the concerns of how much it costs to raise a family, or people feeling burnt out from what happened during the pandemic and the after effects of that. Just as a young person yourself, what do you think led to that shift?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think the podcast with Theo Von, Joe Rogan, um, that's a big podcasts are huge in the young community right now, as we know. And so I think when you see that long form kind of Q&A with Trump, and it's more of a off the cuff and relaxed conversation, not necessarily all about politics, I think that's what drove the base to support him a little bit more, seeing a different side of the politics from him. And also, from personal experience, I'm 25, I'm from Rhode Island, and I just bought a house here a year ago with my girlfriend. I know how expensive it is to start a family, to have a house together. It's not cheap. Oil prices keep going up. Electricity bills just went up in Rhode Island. When you see that, and then you can correlate that to the 4 years we just had, I think it's for a lot of young voters. It was what some of them just, I think, liked Trump's policies and liked Trump for who he was, and I think the other half was just sick of what we just witnessed for 4 years and wanted change, and so they knew he's going to be the guy of change. Kamala would be more of the same. So they, went with him. And I think, that was the major shift we saw in this election.
And I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but this will be something I'll definitely touch a little bit upon for 2026 when we get to that. But, although you had the young men shift, right, the younger women voters are not really doing that rightward shift. I know it's a little bit, tough to explain for that group of voters because you have three guys here, but is there anything your organization is looking at to possibly get some of those voters into your guys' camp?
Yeah, I think, we're looking right now for, when we're out there every day prospecting people to join our organization, to be a part of our what we're trying to do. And obviously, we want women to be a part of that, and we're, doing everything we can to, get them involved. In our last few, we've actually had quite a few new faces. And it's been, really just trying to get the message out to people that, we are a big organization that has a lot of tools. So come join us and we can do some really good things.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, if you don't mind, when it comes to women and joining the organization or speaking to any women that are tend to be, a little bit more inclined with politics, I really do think the biggest thing that they focus on, aside from inflation and those hot button issues, is law enforcement, law and order, safety, protection. Women that I've met, a lot of them are very concerned about that. And that is always one of the bigger things that they've always talked about.
And normally I would go to 2026 next, but we got a little bit of a not road bump, but a next thing in between now and then. So there's a Rhode Island GOP party leadership election happening on March 1st. Currently, we're taping this a couple days before that. So there might be some more developments between now and then, but there's been some endorsements happening. You have two candidates, Joe Powers, current chairman, Jessica Drew Day, who was on that leadership ticket with Joe in the 2023 election. She's challenging for this. You guys have already, your organization have already you endorsed Joe Powers. The race is a little bit messy, though. What do you guys think of the state of the race right now?
It's not good for the party. It's not a lot of the things that are being thrown back and forth are just not accurate. And one thing I will say, Chairman Powers, the one thing I do respect and admire is he believes in not attacking other Republicans. And we've seen that a lot of people have noticed that he's been relatively quiet with a lot of things, and he hasn't attacked other Republicans. And that's a big thing that he's been telling folks, is he doesn't want to respond. He doesn't want to create any more rift. Joe Powers, I will say, as chair, he has given every resource to the young Republicans, and he's been there for us. That is why we made that endorsement for him, is because of all the resources and how available he's been to us. We make phone calls to everybody on the leadership. We ask them to attend our events. His opponent, I called multiple times and asked her to attend events, and she never did. I think that speaks volumes to who he is and how he wants to see the young Republicans grow. Up and down the slate, I know, you can talk about Patricia Morgan's on the slate as well, former
Yep, she's running for
representative.
secretary.
I think whenever you're the chair of a minority party, it's never going to be easy. It's always going to be difficult. Then your first term is never going to be easy, but he accomplished a lot by getting election integrity department up and rolling, building the foundation for that last election cycle, working with candidates, hosting different trainings. And again, I find it really interesting to see a woman that couldn't even caucus with Republicans up at the State House now thinks she can bring the Republican Party together and also bringing this much disruption. So I really believe in Chairman Power's ability to work with people and bring everybody together in the party. And I think he's going to come out of this on Saturday, and we're just going to keep our eyes focused on 26 and leave all this behind us. So.
And to add that context, former State Representative Patricia Morgan is running on a slate for the secretary position with Jessica Drew Day and another gentleman who's running for vice chair. And then Joe Powers and most of the current folks who are in the leadership positions are also running on a different slate. So it's kind of like you got this team versus that team pretty much, just to add a little bit of context there for those who may not be tuning into what's going on with that race. Now I think it's time to talk about some 2026. There's every statewide office, every GA race, couple mayoral seats. What's on the YR's target list?
We got some targets for House and for Senate. We want to focus in on and try to find candidates. But the big thing is for us, YRs have always been a backbone for campaigns. We want to make sure that we are accessible to statewide races. Governor's race, we're going to see it looks like we're going to see a bloodbath, whatever happens in that primary for the governor, where it's going to be huge for a Republican to, kind of build their own momentum and go right through, hopefully no primaries, and to face whoever comes out of that Democratic primary. We look at Congress. Corby didn't really raise any money. Corby, who ran in 2024, he still pulled a very close percentage, and a lot of people didn't know who he was. We have some very, very important races, and the YRs need to make sure that we're equipped with the bodies on the ground, boots on the ground, to make sure that we're out phone banking, door knocking, passing the word, and volunteering. That is more crucial than anything else for us right now, is to make sure that we're giving support to the candidates that are making sacrifices of putting their lives on hold to run for these types of offices. We need to make sure that we are there for them and we support them. I'd love to have a YR candidate run for governor, but who knows? We're going to support whoever it is, and we're all going to hopefully rally behind one person as things get messy on the Democratic side.
And earlier you mentioned communities like Woonsocket, which is seeing a rightward shift. It used to have voted for President Biden by I believe 7 points in 2020, and then voted for Trump, which had like an 8 point shift. I think it was like Trump +1 or Trump +2. So you mentioned Woonsocket, you mentioned your guys' backyard, West Warwick. Give me some districts. What districts are we looking at?
Again, we're going to keep that internal right now. We're working on that. But there are some areas that we are targeting right now that we want to make sure that that we're going to be out there in full force.
Do either of you guys plan to run for office? In your case, Kenny, again in 2026, and then Dan, do you plan to throw your hat in the ring for anything?
No, not right now. Not in the cards. Not always off the table, but right now it's not on the cards.
It's a lot more fun to be behind the scenes and not the one out there sometimes, I can tell you.
Well, speaking of behind the scenes, you would be working with these campaigns. Are you hearing of any? Is it too early? Anybody you're hearing that might be running for stuff, whether it be local or even statewide?
Yeah, there's interest with people wanting to run for statewide office. And I know people are having those conversations. I know people are gearing up to either run again for, because sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times to really crack the nut on getting in certain areas, getting your name ID up. But it's important that every candidate that is having these discussions are starting to build out the infrastructure now, and that when they're ready to announce, they do it on their own terms. And that's the big thing. Make sure the infrastructure is there and they're going by their timeline that they're comfortable with.
And obviously, 2026 is a long way from now. In politics, 2 weeks could even be an eternity. I mentioned this the last topic where I talked about how a lot of women voters on the younger side didn't really shift rightward as young men did. And that's one of those groups that typically vote in big numbers in midterms, as we've seen with the 2018 blue wave that happened after Trump got elected in 2016. So I don't want to give like a bold prediction saying it's going to be a blue wave or a red wave, because we obviously don't know what things are going to look like, whether it's the economy, international relations, whatever. But is it in the back of your mind that, there's going to be those voters who didn't vote for Trump that are going to crawl through broken glass to vote in 2026 for anybody that's not a Republican?
Yeah, we don't know what the future is going to hold. 2 years is a long ways away. When you look at it on a national level, that's one thing. On what President Trump does over the course of the next 2 years is going to sway things. Whatever happens on the Democratic side locally in Rhode Island from the governor's race, that's going to control things. So it's an interesting dynamic that we're going to see in such a blue state with now, Republicans having the House, the Senate, the White House. It's interesting. I'm curious to see how that's going to reflect in Rhode Island. I mean, we talk about 2022 when we thought we were going to see a red wave that never came. So 2 years is a long way out. There's going to be a lot of things that happen. Whatever hot button issues that are going to be there in 2026 that candidates are going to be running on, we can almost guarantee we don't know what those issues are. A lot of things are going to happen. So it should be interesting.
Getting a little ahead of myself, I guess. As political observers, we always look at the next election cycle. I got to ask, speaking of the governor's race, obviously there's no GOP candidate yet, and I'm not going to ask you guys to name names or say, I hear this one's running. But out of the current projected names, we're hearing Aaron Gukian. I reported that where he's mulling a run. The 2022 nominee Ashley Kalis is looking at a run. Out of the current, I mean, Jessica De La Cruz did a poll and asked people who they wanted to see, and one of the names on there was Mayor Ken Hopkins of Cranston. Out of the current Republican bench, is there anybody the Wires prefer, or at least any attributes in a candidate that you guys are looking for?
Whoever's going to get the job done, put forth the effort, and understands the issues. You hit on Ashley Kalis, who I had the pleasure of. That was my first political job, was working for her. Aaron Gukian was also running for lieutenant governor at the time. The one thing I will always say about Ashley is she believed in a big tent mentality. It's no secret she put, what was it, $4.6 million into her campaign. But she made sure that she opened every resource to everybody that was running for office. She worked with everybody. When she had people out in the field door knocking, she made it a strict rule to make sure that we had that people canvassing had other candidates' palm cards on hand, and that people were being made aware of the other candidates in the district on top of hers. But that Ashley, I always hope that she runs. I do. I love what she brought to the table. I love the big tent mentality. Dan, you got anything?
Yeah, no, I mean, keep our options open, and we're excited for the 2026 race, and we're throw our support behind the right candidate, and hopefully we can make a change here in Rhode Island in 2026.
That's all I have for the politics section. I'm going to end things off with a non-political topic. You guys probably seen past episodes, and I like to ask this at the end. What do you guys think Rhode Island is best known for?
I was thinking about this question, and I think I'm gonna go with the coffee cabinet, our state drink. That's my favorite thing. My girlfriend was not from Rhode Island; she was born in Arizona. So when we got together, she never had one. I was like, "You have to have this. This is what Rhode Island's known for. It's super good," and she's loved it. So I think, yeah, the coffee milk is my top thing.
Um, I'm going to say bridges because we have a bridge that's borderline ineffective. And we also had a data breach on the bridge program in Rhode Island about a year later. So I'm going to go with bridges in Rhode Island. That's what we're known for right now.
Well, that's all the questions I had, guys. I appreciate you giving me your time for this, and I'm definitely looking forward to having you guys back on for the 2026 cycle. We'll keep track of both sides and what candidates are running for what. And thank you for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. If you want to see future episodes as soon as they're posted on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below and the post notification bell icon to the right of it. I'm Ray Bakari, and I'll see you next time.